Verdun, a name synonymous with one of the most brutal battles of the First World War. But what happens when soldiers fight and die? Well, the living can move on, but some say the dead stay behind. From October 24, 1916, to December 18, 1916, the town of Verdun in northeastern France became the focal point of one of history's longest and bloodiest battles. Two of the most powerful militaries in the world went head-to-head in what would be known as the Battle of Verdun. The Germans wanted to break through the French lines, once and for all putting an end to the war that had been raging since 1914. And while they didn't ultimately succeed, they did inflict some staggering casualties, killing an estimated 350,000 French soldiers. As the battle came to an end, the French began clearing out the trenches and tidying up after the bloody battle. It was at this point that the witnesses started to report strange goings-on in the area. At first, it was just rumors. Stories told around campfires late at night, whispered between soldiers who'd seen too much death and destruction, tales of phantom troops seen marching across the battlefield, coming and going as they pleased. Most were put down to shell shock. The trauma of seeing so much death and fighting day in, day out eventually took its toll on the mind, blurring the line between reality and delusion. But then the sightings began to increase, growing from rumors into full-blown reported events. The soldiers weren't the only ones reporting these goings-on either. Officers started seeing the ghostly figures too, along with nurses and even the chaplains. So here we have to ask ourselves, were these apparitions real or were they imagined? Let's take a look at both sides. On January 27, 1917, French chaplain Theodore Monod was walking through the trenches when he came across something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. As he rounded a corner, he saw a group of soldiers dressed in British uniforms. He stopped dead in his tracks. These men were eerily familiar. They were the same men he had buried just days before. Unmoved by his presence, they continued to march forward until they disappeared over the horizon. Was it possible that the soldiers he had laid to rest had risen from their graves? Or had the stress of the battle finally taken its toll on his mind? It wasn't the only time he would witness such a sight. Just 3 weeks later, on February 18, 1917, he was in a dugout when he heard the unmistakable sound of soldiers marching. When he looked outside, he saw a column of soldiers marching in perfect formation. Once again, they appeared to be British and they seemed to be ghosting through the French lines without being seen. But while Monod couldn't come to a conclusion as to what he was seeing, others were quick to explain them away. According to those who served at Verdun, there were two explanations for the ghost army. The first was that they were simply the victims of shell shock, seeing things that weren't really there. And the second was that the ghosts were real. One of the main proponents of the latter theory was American journalist John Reed, who wrote The War in the Trenches, a correspondent's adventures in France, which was published in 1917. In it, he describes how he saw the same group of soldiers again and again, seemingly trapped in a never-ending patrol. To those who've experienced the horrors of war, these ghostly figures might seem like a relief, a sign that the suffering is about to end. But Reed explains that this isn't the case. Instead, they're an omen of more death and suffering to come. Okay, let's assume for a moment that the ghost army is real. Why would they be haunting the Verdun battlefields? What could they possibly want? Well, for starters, they might just be lost souls, unable to move on because of the turmoil in their hearts. After all, they died in one of the bloodiest battles of the war, taking part in one of the deadliest sieges in human history. There are also reports that the land around Verdun is haunted, with some claiming that even before the battle the area was plagued by ghosts. So it's possible that the land itself is cursed. These poor, tormented souls may not mean any harm, but are simply lost. However, if they are lost, why don't they move on? Sometimes they appear as skeletons, so they might not even be aware that they're dead. After all, they're probably stuck in the state they were last alive, making them ghosts in every sense of the word. It's also possible that they're aware that they've died but are too scared to move on. If that's the case, then it makes sense that they stick together, taking comfort in numbers. Then again, perhaps they're angry. Not everyone moves on peacefully, and maybe these soldiers are angry about the way they died or the reason they're still stuck there. This would explain why they keep coming back, haunting the Verdun battlefield. Some even claim that the ghosts are trying to warn future soldiers that they should not come to Verdun, that the land is cursed and those who fight there will die. Another popular explanation is that these are the spirits of German soldiers, unable to accept the fact that they died on French soil. There were indeed German soldiers who refused to accept defeat, right up until their dying breath. So it's not inconceivable that they could be stuck at Verdun, unwilling to give up even in death. If you believe that these apparitions are real, then you have to ask yourself, why are they only appearing now? Why wait almost 100 years to make themselves known? Well, according to some, it has everything to do with the ending of the war. On November 11, 1918, Germany signed the armistice that brought the war to an end. This meant that all fighting ceased and the German army began retreating. Now, this doesn't mean that the war was over, as it would take another 6 years for the Treaty of Versailles to be signed, but it does mean that no one was fighting anymore. For the first time in 4 years, the guns fell silent. And as the fighting stopped, the ghosts of Verdun appeared. Here, the theory goes, they had waited patiently for 100 years, refusing to move on until the guns fell silent. With no more fighting to come, they were finally able to lay down their arms and move on to the afterlife. So, what do you think? Are the ghost soldiers real? Is this one of those rare instances where the veil between the living and the dead is at its thinnest? Or is this simply a case of shell shock, a side effect of seeing too much death and destruction? Let us know what you think. The Great War devastated Europe and left an estimated 40 million people dead in its wake. In terms of sheer devastation, nothing compares to the First World War, and Verdun was at the heart of that devastation. What happened there didn't stay there, and when the war ended, the dead rose to remind us of what happened. While some might call this a curse, others might see it as a blessing. After all, it's a reminder that no matter how powerful we are, there are forces beyond our control. In the case of Verdun, those forces are the spirits of the dead, forever haunting the battlefields, forever reminding us of the cost of war. In 1932, a monument was erected near the village of Douaumont to commemorate those who died at Verdun. On the black marble slab at the base of the monument, a single quote reads, "They shall not die a second death through oblivion." It's a chilling thought that even in death we can be killed again, this time by being forgotten. It's a warning that as long as we remember those who died at Verdun, their sacrifice will not be in vain. But if we forget, well, then who knows what horrors might befall us. So remember them. Remember the men who fought and died at Verdun. Remember the Ghost Army. Remember the horrors of war, and above all, remember the fallen. Verdun was a tragedy, but it was also a turning point. From that day forward, the tide of war began to turn. And eventually the guns fell silent, bringing an end to the conflict that had torn Europe apart. It's important to remember Verdun not just for the sake of those who died, but for the lessons it can teach us today. It's a reminder of the cost of war, the human cost. It's a reminder that no matter what side you're on, there's always another side, with real people who have families and loved ones waiting for them to come home. So remember Verdun. Remember the Ghost Army. Remember the fallen and pray that we never see their like again. Thank you for watching.